Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to Faith and Fire, the podcast where faith is forged in fire and grace finds us in our deepest battles. I'm Juan Carlos Padilla, a Catholic, a combat veteran, a husband, father, and a man still learning to walk with Christ. This podcast isn't just for veterans. It's for anyone who's ever been in a fight, internally, spiritually, emotionally, and wondered if they'd make it out. Today I want to tell you about a day, actually a point in time in my life, where my faith became real. It wasn't in a church, but it was actually in Iraq in 2003. I'd first like to start out by saying that, I was a cradle Catholic, being Puerto Rican. Obviously, that's the largest religion in Puerto Rico, and so I was born and baptized Catholic. Had your typical Catholic upbringing. Did the first communion, did the catechism classes, all the way up through my confirmation, faith has always played a pivotal role in my life, whether I knew it or not. There was times where, like when I went to college and obviously made some terrible decisions. Some of these decisions really led to me enlisting in the Army back in 1995. And it's one of those things where I enlisted in the Army, went to basic training. I think like everybody else on Sundays, I went to Mass, but it was really just to get out of the barracks and basic training. Really didn't even think about, too many things that, were of the spiritual realm, not really realizing, how powerful adoration, the sacrament of reconciliation, or you just even receiving the Eucharist, as often as possible. And so it was different, but, joined the Army, joined the tanks, and it was actually a heck of an adventure. Got stationed in Germany, back in 1995 in the early fall, late summer of 1995, went to Friedberg, Germany to 1st Brigade, 1st Armored Division. And when I was with the 1st Brigade, 1st Armored Division in Friedberg, Germany, the home of Elvis Presley, I think... later that year, I ended up meeting an amazing woman who ended up later becoming my wife. But I think she was also a cradle Catholic, but we really didn't, surround ourselves by that type of community. We were young. It was, going to clubs, going to bars, going to concerts, going to movies, things of that nature, but really never anything spiritual. I think it was Easter of 1996. We were walking by the base chapel and they were having Easter Mass, and we ended up going. It was actually kind of nice. It was really enjoyable to go with who was going to be my future wife to Easter Mass. But again, didn't think nothing of it. Fast forward a couple of years, we end up getting married. We were about to have our first child. And we get orders to go to Fort Hood, Texas. Mind you, Fort Hood was Fort Hood. I mean, it was very fast-paced, a lot of field training, a lot of training, Ready One type of service, where, we're staying at I think it was Gray Army Airfield. Our tank's ready to go anywhere at a moment's notice. This is also, mind you, my wife's first time away from Europe. And so, something for her to be stuck in a house, with literally cows walking in the backyard. That was, for somebody from the Frankfurt area, very big city. That's a kind of an eye opener for them. But those 2 years went by fast. We had our child, and we ended up re-enlisting and going back to Germany, thinking that going back to Germany would be good for her, and it was great. It was great for all of us. We ended up getting back to Germany in 2001, and then, of course, shortly thereafter, 9/11 happened. It was time to really put everything together and prepare for, potential deployment. Well, about a year and a half later, we end up getting orders to deploy to Iraq, and we get to think it was April or May of 2003. We end up deploying to Kuwait and then eventually to Baghdad, the Baghdad area. And so we ended up getting to the Baghdad area. I was the re-enlistment dude at the time. I was just re-enlisting folks and things of that nature. And, about a month or two go by, and one of the platoon sergeants ended up moving out. And so they asked me to step in to a platoon. I think I went there as just a regular tank commander. But shortly thereafter, I ended up becoming a platoon sergeant for one of the platoons in Bravo Company 237 Armor, and we were at, I believe it was Camp War Eagle. We were attached to 1st Squadron, 2nd ACR. And so what did that really entail? I mean, we did a lot of IED sweeps, we did a lot of Overwatch, we did a lot of show of force with our tanks. When the UN was attacked, we set up outer cordon, for people to go in there and, really try to help those that were wounded and do the evac and stuff. And so we were there for about a week, and I can tell you that our tanks didn't move that much. One of the things that I remember is when we moved our tanks, the asphalt was probably 2 inches lower, 2 or 3 inches lower, based off the weight of the tank and the sheer heat of the street back then. But we did our normal deployment. Like I said, a bunch of IED sweeps. We were used as outer cordon for some searches. We got into Humvees, did presence patrols, had our own section, sector and things of that nature. And nothing really like 3rd ID or the Marines, when they were doing their thunder runs in there. I mean, we did have some engagements here and there, but nothing that was we would have thought would have been the combat we would have seen. I think some of us from our unit saw a little bit moving in to Baghdad, but really, a lot of it just really became, more infantry style, more, in Humvees, presence patrols, walking, things of that nature. But nothing that was like really that would require an M1 tank. It wasn't tank on tank, right? And things of that nature, things that we had trained for. So, fast forward to April 4th of 2004, really when the Mahdi Army, really just kind of stepped up their game and organized a little bit and decided to start taking some towns and cities back, and we were literally supposed to leave. I think it was April 6th. We were supposed to leave. We were doing our left seat, right seat rides with, I think it was 1st Cav that came to help us out and relieve us. And obviously on April 4th of 2004, it was a day that really, it affected a lot of people. The folks from 1st Cav were inside Sadr City, and they had a platoon of folks that, really got ambushed, and I believe it's better explained in the series that National Geographic did, Long Road Home. And so, we ended up setting an outer cordon. People were trying to get to and find those folks from 1st Cav. And so we really were in our tanks, and we were fighting. We were engaging the enemy from our tanks. It's one of those things that just puts things in a perspective. It's like, I'm not going to say be careful what you ask for, because I don't think anybody really asked to go to combat. It was really one of those things where it was, you're in it now. It's really just realistically, you're in it now. Whether you wanted to be in it or not, now you are. And it's with a purpose. It's to, help our brothers that were stuck there. And we did what we were supposed to do there, and we helped out. Unfortunately, that day, a lot of, we lost a lot of good men. A lot of good men were injured, men and women, across the country, really, during this. And later we find out that the Mahdi army, took over some provincial headquarters, Al-Qut, Najaf, Kufa, Diawania, things of that nature. And so instead of us going home the next day or the day after, we ended up going, I believe it was to Al-Qut, to help them kind of help the folks there. We got there a little late, didn't really see any fighting. We were prepared, we were set up, we were told to move out to, I believe it was Najaf / Kufa area. But going through there, we ended up going through a place called Diawania. And we were on our hets, but we were in our tanks on the hets. And that's when we were deliberately ambushed right in the middle of the square of Diawania. And it was really bad. I mean, that's when we ended up proving a myth wrong, that there was always a myth that if you fire a tank off the side of a het, the het's going to flip. It did not. It did break the chains. A lot of folks dismounted off. We had a het that was disabled, and I remember just passing my buddy who was looking at me, and he was trying to break the chains by pivot steering his tank, and they ended up breaking the chains and just getting off the tank. Getting off the het, excuse me. What is it we say? Death before dismount. We're not getting off those tanks, especially in a firefight. He ended up getting off, and a bunch of folks ended up getting off the hets with their tanks and providing cover and coverage and things of that nature. And I remember, I believe it was I forgot the unit's name, but they were from the Kentucky National Guard, and those boys were, they really put in some work that day, driving those hets with 70 tons on the back, and getting us to safety. Obviously, we were using our small arms, our 50 cal. Some were engaging with main gun, and so it was a different experience. That was my first experience using, I believe it was slap T rounds out of the 50 cal, and realizing that just a few of those will melt a barrel in a heartbeat. Those are the Sabo light armor piercing with tracer 50 cal rounds. And I remember going back inside the tank real quick and telling my loader, I said, I just need normal ammo. It's a little too hot up here to be changing barrels every couple of minutes. And that kind of brings me to where I kept my headspace and timing gauge. My headspace and timing gauge for the 50 cal. I was in a Ziploc bag that was always with me, and inside that Ziploc bag was my headspace and timing gauge, a rosary, and I want to say it was a St. Michael prayer card. I still have it. I got to take a look at it, but I still have the same headspace and timing gauge. It's in the same Ziploc bag. I'm surprised it's not no free ads for Ziploc, but that's. That bag is still going strong, over 20 years later, and so, but it's in my truck now, and that's where I keep it. It's just a reminder, but yeah, I mean, it's, it was one of those things where, that whole first week, from April 4th until April 10th or something like that, or 10th or 12th, it was just a whirlwind. And we ended up getting to, I think we ended up going back to Diawania, and we ended up, staying there for a little bit in an encampment or compound, after a couple of days, and we ended up getting there. And that's when I realized that, one of my friends, he was with us before, then he ended up going to college and coming back to us as a lieutenant. Ken Ballard had was killed in action, and that's when I think that I had to rely on my faith. We were a tank battalion, right? We weren't, even in simulated training. I mean, we never, the enemy was supposed to take us out, right? But realistically, in that year and some change we'd been there, we really haven't lost anyone. We've had people get injured, things of that nature, but it became really real that week of April 4th. I remember a priest was flown in, it was just hard to, that was the first time that really we had taken actions in combat that were there in your face, right? It wasn't middle of the night. It wasn't, a couple thousand meters away using a main gun round, or anything. This was literally street to street in an M1 tank or in an M1 tank on a het. And so, it was one of those things where it was just trying to find understanding in everything that had just happened. I think that I'm trying to remember, it was 20 years ago. Was it confession? Was it just a talk with the priest? I don't know, but, it was very difficult for me to comprehend everything, and to still remain focused, in what we were doing. But we ended up continuing to fight. And then sometime in middle of May, we crossed, I believe it was the Euphrates River, into Kufa. And there was, 4 tanks, 3 tanks? I can't remember, but I know that it was piecemeal. It was different platoons. We didn't have that many tanks that were fully functioning. I mean, some tanks, their halon bottles went off and they couldn't go. Some tanks, their skirts were hanging on by literally a bolt. And these are a couple 100-pound skirts, that were just hanging on by a bolt, so they couldn't go. And so I think we had 3 or 4 tanks, and I ended up being the trail tank going into Kufa. And we really were just going in to check out this building, to see if it was a storage depot for ammunition and things of this nature. That we went in there. It was, who knows what time it was, midnight, 1, 2 in the morning. But we ended up getting boxed in, right in front of this mosque. And all of a sudden it just felt like the ground opened up, and we were just getting bombarded with RPG rounds, small arms fire, you name it. They were throwing it at us. We were really locked in, and they were just throwing it at us. Regardless of, we were engaging, we were, trying to remain, within the ROE, right? Obviously that's a mosque. It's, I believe somebody had told me it was the 2nd or 3rd most holiest shrine, so we're trying to engage around, but still make sure that we're protected. So that went on for, I don't even recall how long, I don't recall, but it seemed like an eternity at that point in time. We end up getting the word, that we had a tank crew, that their turret was penetrated by an RPG, and they had a couple of injured folks in there, and we had to get back across the Euphrates River and get them to get those fellas some help. Their tank was still functioning, and so I was asked to lead us out, my tank. So we turned around, pivot steered around, and there was barriers there. I mean, I'm trying to remember who put that barrier there, right? You know what I mean? We just drove in on that street, and now it's kind of blocked off. And so I remember we tried to shoot our way through it, but the rounds were just not really exploding and, giving us the space that we need to move these big tanks through. Because, one of the things about the tanks is, it's made for desert sand, it's made for dirt, mud, right? It's not made for concrete. You know what I mean? You get some of those concrete pillars or rebar or anything like that, inside the track. You can throw a track and you're stuck. You're moving nowhere. You know what I mean? You got a 70-ton paperweight in the middle, blocking the street and technically blocking the injured folks. Their ability to go get some help. And so, I remember we had MPAT rounds, multi-purpose anti-tank rounds, but they were also could be used to have an air mode, like a proximity, where if your laser said 500 meters, it would try to detonate. In a perfect world, it would detonate at 500 meters of travel time, and so we trained to use them against helicopters, things of that nature. But I think I told my loader, I said, hey, load MPAT and put like 200 meters in there. Or just put it to air is what I meant to say, not 200 meters. He couldn't do that from the round. Put it to air mode, and then I had the gunner lays the big barriers that were put up, and then that made a difference. They were impacting and exploding, and so we were able to make a little bit of room to get through, and we were able to lead. Start leading the convoy of tanks back across the Euphrates River, and it was weird because everything looked different when we came in. Being the last tank, you're following the tank in front of you. You're really looking behind you. Things of that nature. But man, it felt like they were ready for us on the way back. It just felt like we just kept getting rocked and rocked by RPGs and RPGs after RPGs, small arms fire. And I remember that I had a good buddy of mine in the tank right behind me. He goes, hey, Battle White 4, this is Blue 4. I said, what's up, man? I said, I see the river, man. We're almost there. And he goes, yeah, Roger. Just want to let you know your tank's on fire. And I'm like, what? And I look behind me, and my turret ring's on fire. One of those RPGs did its damage, right? So we're hightailing it back. We get to the bridge on the Euphrates River. I just get to the what do you call that? The military side of the other side of the bridge, and then I turn my tank around to provide cover for the other tanks that are coming through, but enough room for them to cross and get across, the river where the rest of our task force type of stuff was waiting for us on the other side. I remember a surreal moment where I'm looking back and all you see is smoke clouds and plumes, and I just took off my CBC helmet, and I asked my platoon leader was my loader at the time. He wanted to go, and so he jumped in the loader seat. And I said, hey, sir, I need a fire extinguisher. He goes, what do you mean you need a fire extinguisher? I said, sir, we're on fire. Would love to be able to put this fire out, And, it's just a surreal moment standing there on the back of a tank, just having probably gone through, who knows if it was 15 minutes or, 4 hours of fighting. But it was a very surreal moment, and it was one of those moments that I reflect back that I truly know that God's grace and presence was there with me. I don't think that I don't remember my hatch being closed. I was, fighting out of the turret, and it was interesting. It's like I don't ever think I was scared. I think we're all scared, right? There's a point in time where, fear plays a factor, but that was once the bullets started, once the shooting happened, your training kicks in. But for me, I think it was my training and my faith, right? That, whatever's going to happen is God's will, right? But that was a very, very long night, but it was one that I always remember as kind of like, not that not at that moment in time was I like, oh, I got to start going to mass every day, or I got to do this. No, not even close. It was probably almost, I want to say it was probably 18 years later. But that was a pivotal moment, and then we did a little more fighting here and there, but that was like, the biggest engagement that I remember vividly, and one that was in my dreams for a long time. It's kind of interesting that I'm still trying to remember everything, because it's not that I've tried to suppress these memories or anything like that. It's just, that I truly feel that, through my faith, it's something that lives with me, but it's nothing that it's not something that is present in my brain all the time, and the only answer I can give to that is just my faith, kind of healing, healing those bad dreams, or those flashbacks, etc. I mean, I still have them, who doesn't, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you were in a car accident, combat, survive something that was, what do they say, scarring, right? I mean, it's still gonna be there, right? But it's just, how you deal with it, and obviously for me it was faith. But that's just kind of, one of my stories that, when I began my, I wouldn't say my faith journey, but when I went to a men's retreat in 2022, I was able to kind of like truly go and think, and it was during Eucharistic adoration. I was able to really put myself and give and allow God's grace to let me let go, and I remember in Eucharistic adoration, in reconciliation, I think I had gone to, in Afghanistan, I had gone to confession with Father Matt Foley, I think it was a good confession. It probably wasn't the best confession, but when I went to this retreat, I just, it was the first time that I allowed myself to truly just let go of everything. And it was the most, I can tell you, I got broken down like a shotgun, man. I cried like a baby. I'm not gonna lie. You know what I mean? I think I'm a man's man like everybody else, but I mean, and if that's the case, then I think every man's man from once in a while needs to go and find a corner somewhere and just let it go, man. Just let it go. Wow, what a feeling that was when I left, to truly feel the Holy Spirit, working through me, working through the priest that, that helped me through confession. It was just amazing, an amazing experience that I just can't, I can't explain to this day. And it's been, 3 years since I've lived that experience. And it's really gotten me back on my faith journey and really gotten me to be able to open up and talk about just this right now. I mean, who knows? I mean, but really, I want to be able to do this to help others, that it's okay. I tell you, it is okay. It kind of reminds me of Psalm 23. Understandingly, not just made famous by Samuel L. Jackson, but, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will feel no evil, for you are with me. I think a lot of us that have dealt with adversity in our life have lived that, and I still believe in that, and every time that, it comes back in my dreams or in sounds or in flashes, I also have to remember that I am not alone. That I am there with God. God is there with me, whether it's, in Mass, whether it's through my family, etc. And it's funny, I told you all earlier that about my rosary with my Headspace and Timing Gauge. I carry a different rosary now in my pocket every day. And it's not for superstition. You know what I mean? It's not. It's just, a lot of it is just, that it reminds me that, I've seen, combat, right? What would be hell on earth, right? Something like that. And obviously, being able to understand that there is a heaven, and that we don't run from our problems, you know what I mean? That, we don't walk alone, Jesus Christ is walking with us at all the times, obviously I still struggle, and we're going to talk about that in future podcasts. This one's going to be a little longer, because I'm just kind of telling you just a little bit of some of my combat experiences. I ended up doing 3 more deployments after Iraq. But it's just like, it's okay to cry, right? I mean, I think after that experience that I told you at that retreat, it's kind of funny, right? I was a man's man. I don't want none of that kumbaya, huggy type of stuff, man. Now, man, I can't really meet anybody without giving them a hug. I can't really, I watch a stupid commercial, commercial about a dog or something like that. Man, I'm bawling, right? I'm crying. It's kind of funny. I think my 12-year-old thinks it's very embarrassing, but it is what it is, right? You know what I mean? It's like it keeps me clean, and so it's great, but I tell you, you know what I mean? I've gotten more involved in my church, and serving and things of this nature, and providing back. And to me, just creating this podcast is hopefully going to be able to help somebody learn how to cope with what they're going through, But yeah, I mean, if you're listening to this and, you feel broken, lost, forgotten, I think we've all been there. Some of these other episodes are going to deal with coming home. Some pretty harsh topics, right? Coming home, dealing with family, dealing with children, being a husband, being a provider, and I can give you a preview. I mean, I struggled with alcohol for a very long time, not saying that, that I struggled with different ideations, whether it was alcohol, suicide, addiction, couple later, next couple of podcasts, we'll start talking about that, right? Maybe you can relate, maybe you can't relate, maybe you're going through it now, right? And you're still in it, and I want to promise you that I'm not going to give up on you, and that's because God hasn't given up on you, You don't have to have it all together to pray. You don't need perfect words. You just need to open your mouth and your heart and let him in, The same God who met me, on that tank, in Kufa, Iraq in 2004, if you let him in, using your free will, he will meet you wherever you are. So I'd like to close the day with a small prayer. Let us pray. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, thank you for meeting us in the fire, for walking us through the chaos, for not waiting until we're clean to love us. For every listener who feels far from you, pull them close. Remind them that they are not alone, that they're seen, that they're loved. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, I want to thank you all for joining me on Fire and Grace. Next week, we're going to talk about what it means to come home and why it's often the hardest part. Until then, stay battle-tested, stay faithful, and know this, your story isn't over.